preserving the memory of the greatest generation, one aircraft at a time. Tom Reilly was born in Philadelphia in 1942. He was the second son of Edward, an engineer for the New York Port Authority, and schoolteacher mother, Anita. His older brother, Peter, had been born in 1938. When Tom was 2 years old, the family moved to Pompton Lakes, New Jersey. Pompton Lakes was a small community named for its 175-acre man-made lake. Tom was adventuresome, great with his hands, and always thinking outside the norm. He would build small wooden boats and sailboats. The lake was his lab and playground. Tom had ambitions of being a boat builder.
I built a boat in the basement of the house, and it was a small, thin kayak sort of affair, but it wouldn't fit out the door.
After high school, Tom spent a year and a half at Wagner College in Staten Island, New York. One day, instead of heading off to college, he headed south.
I hated the snow, and every time I'd stop for gas, I said, "Does it snow here?" "Yes." I'd roll the window up, and I ended up in Orlando, Florida. And I had experience on fiberglass boat building, and I went to Craft. They didn't have any openings. So then I became a carpenter's helper doing roofing and laying cinder block.
One day, while riding his motorcycle, Tom noticed a sign that read, "Learn to Fly, $234. Tom had $236 in his wallet. He entered and said, "Teach me to fly." 16 days later, Tom Reilly had his pilot's license. Tom had also learned to skydive and had become a skydiving instructor. One eventful day, while packing a parachute, a World War II P-51 Mustang landed and taxied by him.
With fire coming out of the exhaust, big four-bladed propeller. "What is that?" "Well, that's a P-51, the best fighter of World War II. I said, "Take me for a ride." And he did. It was straight up, straight down, 400 miles an hour over the ground, upside down. And the next day, I was in the airplane business.
A friend told Tom about 4 Yale trainers available for sale in Canada. Tom drove to Canada, bought all 4, restored them, sold 3, and kept 1 so he could learn to fly a tail dragger. Tom then took a job in Pennsylvania helping to restore a P-38 to airworthiness. On a day trip to visit his folks in New Jersey, Tom stopped at New Jersey's Caldwell Airport and happened onto a derelict B-25 Mitchell. Tom bought it, got a buyer to help finance the rebuild, and spent a year working in the cold and snow so he could fly it to Orlando to continue the restoration.
The airplane was sitting there derelict for years, and people would come out and take parts off of it. Anything that would come off, it would be gone. So as I'm putting the airplane together, parts would show up underneath the airplane. People would see that the airplane was going together, and they'd bring back the missing parts. That was my first B-25. After that, I started getting interested in pretty much only B-25s.
In the course of things, Tom got his type rating for the B-25, a special license to fly that aircraft. He bought another derelict B-25 in St. Cloud, Florida, restored it, and taught his buyers, 4 oilmen, to fly it.
The Ponchito, which is a very famous airplane now, it's out there flying all the time. And after that, there was 7 or 8 different B-25s that I acquired, worked on getting flyable, sold them.
A man named Bob Collins had purchased a B-17 Flying Fortress at an auction in Mesa, Arizona. Tom learned to fly it as he co-piloted and ferried it to Kissimmee, Florida to be restored.
So I ended up getting my type rating at a B-17. So you end up getting stacks of type ratings.
Tom met Susie Furdas in 1982.
When I met him, he was always different from everybody else. He never conformed to what you would think people do. And there wasn't anything he couldn't do. I mean, my car didn't work. He could fix my car. He can build houses. He can do everything.
At the time, Tom was learning to be a skywriter.
And one day he was up in the sky and he thought he'd say, "Hi, Susie." And he told me to look up in the sky.
Unfortunately, Tom spelled her name incorrectly. Susie with 2 Z's instead of 1.
I was young. I was dating. I thought it was cute. Yeah, so I kept it spelled the way he spelled it.
Tom and Susie with two Z's and her two children, Mike and Donna, became a family on July 28, 1985. Tom and Susie's partnership carried over into the warbird business. Family settled in Kissimmee, Florida, where between 1985 and 2004, they owned and operated an FBO that was also a working air museum, a school to teach basic restoration procedures, and hosted annual warbird events and warbird rides.
People would come from England and all over the country and wander through and see a Corsair being rebuilt, a B-25, a P-40.
They also supported the Experimental Aircraft Association's EAA Young Eagles program, veterans groups, and school children. In 2004, a series of devastating hurricanes laid waste to the museum and to the display aircraft. Tom had sold a P-40 and a B-17 to a man from Douglas, Georgia, named Don Brooks. Don had also become a friend. After the hurricane, Tom was commuting to Douglas to work on restoring some of Don's warbird aircraft. Don gave Tom an offer he couldn't refuse.
He said, look, your place in Florida's torn down from Hurricane Charlie. You got the property sold. You don't want to have employees anymore. You're tired of living in Kissimmee. Move up here with me, fly my airplanes, restore my airplanes, so forth like that. Let me think about it. Okay, and that was it. I went home to Susie and I said, we're moving to Douglas, Georgia. She says, where?
After settling in Douglas, Georgia, Tom joined forces with Don Brooks to complete to flying condition his PT-17 Stearman and P-40 Warhawk and work on another B-17 Flying Fortress. In 2013 came the project of a lifetime, an extremely rare restoration of the XP-82 twin Mustang. The XP-82 was designed to escort long-range bombers beyond the capabilities of the P-51 Mustang. It saw its first action in the Korean conflict, where it downed 4 North Korean MiG fighters.
I love taking airplanes that people say they can't be rebuilt.
Finding and acquiring plans, parts, and in many cases making the parts he couldn't find is a puzzle on its own. Then there's the challenge to assemble it all into something that can safely fly. That effort took over 10 years and over 200,000 labor hours by Tom and the men and women of his team. Tom is a craftsman among few in the world, adept in metal, electrical work, fabric, fabrication, and the nuances of vintage aircraft.
Tom has restored over 25 warbird aircraft to flying condition and continues his work today. In over 50 years, he has never had a maintenance-related accident.
Their XP-82 successfully took flight on December 31st, 2018. It has been called the restoration of the century. Tom Reilly has won top honors at both Sun and Fun Fly-In in Lakeland, Florida, and EAA's Oshkosh, Wisconsin. Tom was also inducted in 2022 into the EAA Warbirds of America Hall of Fame. Tom and Susie's affection for the B-25 continues. They own and fly at air shows their own B-25 Mitchell called Killer Bee, all the while enjoying loving their children and grandchildren.
When you see an airplane fly that you had spent 10, 12, 15 years on,
the Georgia Aviation Hall of Fame, on this 29th day of April 2023, proudly inducts Thomas Reilly.